There is even some evidence that we can reverse aging in some degree, especially in cells.
Meet Dr. Morgan Levine, a former Yale professor and currently a founding principal investigator at Altos Labs. Altos Labs is a new $3 billion anti-aging biotech startup whose funders are said to include Jeff Bezos. Dr. Morgan is an expert in molecular mechanisms that drive biological aging.
Hi, I'm Dr. Morgan Levine. I'm a professor who specializes in biology of aging. Biological age, we actually think is malleable. We know that aging can be slowed. We see this when comparing across species. Species don't decline all at the same rate. Some of them actually do this at such a slow rate, what we call negligible senescence, that we actually can't observe aging in those systems. So chronological age is what it says on your driver's license. However, this is different from what we call biological age, which is really measuring the state of the organism. We might say that even though you're chronologically 50 years old, you have a biological state that actually resembles someone who's more like a 60-year-old. And what that means is we can actually slow the rate at which these changes accumulate, or maybe even reverse them and go back to a better functioning state. And with that, we would actually give people more years of life without the painful parts of aging. We actually think that only about 10 to maybe 20% of your lifespan is dictated by your genes. And this is good news because it actually means we have a lot more control over how fast we're aging. There is even some evidence that we can reverse aging in some degree, especially in cells.
Biological age is the age at which our body is functioning, which can be affected by our lifestyle choices. Biological age is more informative than chronological age for predicting risk of disease or death. That's because it is not chronological time that drives the development of disease, but rather the biological changes taking place among the molecules and cells in our bodies. Most people's biological age will be within plus or minus 5 years of their chronological age, but you can have outliers of up to 10 or more years. The wonderful thing, compared with chronological age, is that biological age is modifiable. We don't yet know exactly how to modify it to the greatest extent, but the clock can be made to tick slower, or even possibly go backwards, in response to our behaviors, though it can also speed up. The first step is getting a valid and reliable measure of it, which Dr. Morgan's lab has been working on.
Can we measure biological age? If you've already visited your doctor and you've got an annual blood test, you probably can get your phenotypic age test for free. So there are online calculators that list the 9 biomarkers that you actually need to calculate your phenotypic age. These are freely available on the web. So all you would need to do is go and find your most recent lab test, input the values, and the algorithm will actually produce a phenotypic age measure for you. So can we reverse aging?
One notable thing she emphasized is that lifestyle change such as eating habits can help us maintain health span.
Lifestyle right now, our best ticket in terms of slowing our aging process. So you can actually boost things like resilience through different lifestyle behaviors.
In this video, Dr. Morgan will delve into 4 immediate lifestyle changes that can effectively decelerate the aging process. Let's start with the crucial aspect of exercise.
Exercise, I think, is such a simple thing that so few people, everyone's waiting for the magic pill. Exercise is amazing. It makes you feel good. For me, trying to maintain an active lifestyle as much as possible, I like to do things that just are fun, so hiking or, any of these classes. But probably, if I were thinking the most beneficial, probably things like HIIT, is try to do that as much as I can.
High-intensity interval training, or HIIT, incorporates several rounds that alternate between several minutes of high-intensity movements to significantly increase the heart rate to at least 80% of one's maximum heart rate, followed by short periods of lower-intensity movements. Interval training was first introduced in the 1950s as a higher-intensity form called sprint interval training, which reached 100% maximum heart rate and was used to improve the performance of elite Olympic athletes. Exercise? I actually don't think that there's good evidence that exercise is not beneficial. There was a study that showed that there was a very limited increase in lifespan for the exercised mice versus sedentary mice. But the important thing in that study is they showed there was an increase in health span, which ultimately to me is the more important thing. Health span differs from lifespan in that lifespan is the number of years someone lives from birth until death, while health span is the number of years someone is healthy without chronic and debilitating disease. What we want is health span, which is described as the maintenance of full function as nearly as possible to the end of life. Now, let's dive into 3 ways of eating that can help you boost your health span.
There are really three components of diet that seem to be impacting aging. So the first is how much we eat, the second is what we eat, and the third is when we eat. So in terms of how much we eat, a lot of science went into this idea of caloric restriction. Caloric restriction isn't starvation. It's usually just about a 20% reduction in the overall calorie intake. People have seen that when animals are caloric restricted, they tend to live longer. We're actually more prone to overeating. So some researchers have figured out that it might not be the caloric restriction that's actually the beneficial thing. So even if you can't restrict your calories, just moving away from overeating is probably going to have a beneficial effect for most people. The other thing that's been studied is this concept of what we eat. A lot of research has gone into whether things like a plant-based diet are actually beneficial to aging and longevity. And there seems to be some evidence that eating less animal products, more fruits and veggies, more whole foods is going to be better overall. Longevity science says plant-based diet is probably the best diet. There's a lot of evidence from both epidemiological, which is the science when you actually look at populations, as well as some more emerging clinical trials that suggest that a diet rich in mostly plant-based foods can actually extend your lifespan and prevent disease. Also minimizing things like refined sugars and the things that we know are bad for our health.
So, what does Dr. Morgan Levine actually eat?
I eat, I would say 90 to 95% plant-based. I do eat some fish. Try to keep kind of like a Japanese type diet.
The traditional Japanese diet is considered one of the healthiest diets in the world. The Japanese pride themselves in having one of the lowest rates of obesity in the world, as well as low incidences of certain hormone-dependent cancers. The food would typically consist of rice with plenty of local vegetables and fermented foods such as miso soup and pickled vegetables, all particularly good for healthy digestive system. If you want more detail on Japanese diet, please check out my video on Japan's oldest fitness instructor, 92 years old Takeshima Mika-san.
The third comes down to when we eat, and this is really a new field in aging and longevity science. But what scientists found is actually fasting can mimic some of the benefits that we've seen with caloric restriction. So if people can perhaps minimize their eating to a small window, we think that this can actually recapitulate a lot of the benefits that we're seeing in the caloric restriction studies. The idea of why things like caloric restriction or fasting might actually improve our aging process is because we think this evokes this idea of hormesis in our bodies. What hormesis refers to is a mild stressor that actually makes our bodies more resilient and robust to stress over time. So having these short-term mild stressors, whether it be fasting or whether it be a small caloric deficit, actually makes our bodies more resilient against a lot of the changes we see that increase with aging.
So in terms of what we eat, how and when does Dr. Morgan Levine really eat to maximize the benefit?
And then I do intermittent fasting where I don't eat until usually like 1 o'clock. Again, that I think we don't know for sure whether that's beneficial, but for now, just sticking to it.
On average, only 10 to 30% of our lifespan is estimated to be due to genetics. That means how we age will largely be down to our behaviors. By implementing exercises to boost heart rate and blood circulation, preventing overeating together with mainly plant-based diet with time intervals, we may be able to slow down aging, which is the root cause of many of the diseases.